Where is the U.S. economy today from that economically devastating blow that occurred in 2008? Hi, I'm Calvin Saligubang, and this is America Now. So the U.S. is still recovering from the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. But how did they get there? Well, a company named AIG took on a huge risk as Wall Street started to bundle home loans as mortgage-backed securities and selling slices of these to investors. They started making big bucks off the interest. So the investors started pushing them to get more loans. So what the lenders do is they start to bottom feed. They used to have a credit score and a down payment in order to lend, but that score was dramatically lowered and no down payment was required. So the borrower, or the regular guy on the street, said, hey, they know what they're doing, or else they wouldn't be in that position. So they bite because they think they can afford it. They reach for the American dream and buy the home. The banks or lenders knew this was really risky, so they decided to get insurance. If mortgages defaulted, then the insurance would cover it. One company decided to take on this huge risk, and that was AIG, which stands for American International Group. And the question is, why did they do all of this? Because they were making a lot of money to hold that risk, hundreds and millions in dollars of fees, and all they figured would happen is the house market would just go up. But then the worst came to worse. House prices started to go down. How? The poor people with bad credit scores see that the teaser rate on their mortgage has hit its limit, and it gets too expensive for them, and they default. This makes the supply of existing housing on the market skyrocket and prices nosedive. With this happening, the mortgage-backed securities tank, and AIG is left to pay off the swaps that they made with the banks. But they did this with too many companies around the world and had to pay them all back at the same time. AIG could obviously not afford this, and they went under. They insured many banks, and all of them went under as well, and all they could do is book massive losses. This is when the whole financial system went tumbling down in 2008. So, where is America now? After countless jobs were laid off and the GDP of America plummeting by 5.1%. According to Lisa Mattingly, an economist at Fidelity Investments, she says the U.S. is in the midsection of the recession cycle. And this is shown on a diagram, with China in the early stage and Germany in the late stage, almost hitting recessions. These stages represent where an economy is in terms of recession and also in the business cycle. Since the U.S. is still in recovery and their growth is peaking, the U.S. is well on their way past recovery, even if it means slow and steady. The U.S. had a strong finish to 2013, with a few of the macroeconomic players changing in the past few years. GDP has risen by 2.6% since the last year, and the unemployment rate is now at 7%, which is an all-time low since the recession. Although monetary policy discussions about quantitative easing tapering over the summer provoked a harsh response from the bond market, the Federal Reserve has decided to continue with it anyways. This is because economic data has been positive, and these readings come from the AEIR, the American Institute for Economic Research. Apparently, employment, consumer spending, industrial production, and inflation all beat their expectation, and it's been going 5 months strong. There is an interview of an executive chairman agreeing with these readings, and further explains how tapering improves the economy.
Joining me to discuss what happens next is Mark Mobius, Executive Chairman of Templeton Emerging Markets. Now that we actually have tapering, is all the bad news priced in?
Yes, but I think the tapering story was overdone, frankly. I don't think tapering is significant in money terms. And the reason why I say that is that central banks around the world, not only the US, have been expanding their balance sheets tremendously. And people will say, well, where is this money? Well, some of it has gone into the stock market. You can see the U.S. market has performed very well. A lot of it has gone right back into central bank bonds. Gradually, this money will be distributed into the economies, which is why I am now very confident that 2014 will do very, very well.
Some short-term implications are that the U.S. is starting to look good, and as of right now, should continue to do what they're doing. For long-term implications, certain factors and stakeholders must be kept at watch in order to make sure the short-term stays a lot longer than it should. There are 6 areas in total to watch for 2014. First is the Federal Reserve and their tapering. Ever since they started doing this, uncertainties towards monetary policy started to go down, but questions still remain, such as how will the pace of tapering progress since the Fed has decided to continue by data dependency and not a set schedule. This could cause a huge change since the Fed has decided to keep interest rates low, but if bond markets were to change this, housing, capital investment, and durable goods spending could slow down. 2 is housing. Housing activity has risen since the recession ended and is almost consistent with prior expansion levels, but well below the housing bubble of 2003 to 2006. With home pricing rising, net worth in households is also rising, and this means consumer spending is sustaining, which is important since a large contributor to GDP and economic growth is consumption and consumer spending. Third is energy. Energy plays a crucial role in the U.S. economy for 2014. Energy projects are suspect to price swings. If they were to go down, spending and saving could potentially increase, like spending money on gas and not be afraid of the prices. Also, it creates higher profits and creates jobs, because there is now competitive advantage, therefore rising demand, which requires a higher supply. 4 is capital spending. It has been either weak or negative for the past 4 quarters, but new investment cycles could help it accelerate growth in 2014. It is not yet mentioned how they would do this, but further reports will certainly analyze this. 5 is profit margins. This is a huge factor. The level of this have been record high for the U.S., but many things could diminish this, such as labor costs rising. Pressure on profit margins is impossible to ignore. If prices were to fall in any market, it could be a catastrophic blow to the U.S.'s progress and recovery. 6 is debt demand and credit growth. The Fed has been printing money and hasn't been putting it in the economy yet. This is because credit growth has been very weak. This might be due to banks' lack of desire to lend, persistence of overly restrictive lending standards, a lack of credit-worthy borrowers, a lack of demand for credit by qualified borrowers, or a combination of any of these. They might feel hesitant to borrow or lend because this was the cause of the recession, when there was an excessive debt buildup. Bringing down the excessive debt buildup for consumers in some parts of the financial system is progressing significantly, but until borrowing is gone up by the business and consumer sector, economic growth in the U.S. will remain at an unwanted level. The U.S. is in recovery and is on the verge of becoming expansionary. It will take a lot of work, but they have gotten to a good start. They are working on the 3 main macroeconomic players, that is unemployment, GDP, and inflation, and it is a perfect example on the broad topic of macroeconomics as it relates to all aspects of its topics, as in business cycles, GDP, and recessions. By sticking in the injections of increasing investment from the Fed, making new money, and banks hopefully wanting to lend it, and increase exports from the U.S., they are looking good. If the U.S. keeps in mind stakeholders and criteria that is important to their economic growth, which involves 6 key components, then they should be fine. Hi, I'm Calvin Salagubang, and this was America Now.